Cole, your read from Home Depot to the guys that you own, like Lennar, how would you categorize the housing market?
Yeah, I categorize the housing market as for the buyers, it's not as good as it was 3 to 6 months ago. At the same time, the picture's been painted that we're going to go into really a nasty downturn in housing. It's going to be dark and it's going to be ugly and it's going to be Fed induced. And that's just not true. I mean, if you look at the housing data that we saw today in starts, the month we just produced was the average of 2020, including the pandemic. It would have been the best month of any month, 2009 to 2019. So the idea that we're going to a tailspin, I think Home Depot is just showing that. They mentioned that they're in some of the do-it-yourself, so kind of like the lower price point, lower income kind of sphere. I think you're seeing a little more weakness, and that's the kind of stuff that would read probably better across the Walmart. But this is a great economy. I'm just we just don't think people should confuse that. Supply hasn't changed, as your guest just mentioned just a second ago on the home building side. And so we don't understand why people are so worried about tight supply and millennials are coming, and how can this be as terrible as people are painting a picture?
Cole, do you think also that the home builders have learnt lessons, that they will see what is happening and manage accordingly? Last time round, it was build, then everything broke. This time round, maybe less so.
I agree. So I'll give you, and Guy, you'll appreciate this because, on your side of the pond, home builders tend to not borrow money for land. So the UK home builders, as an example, they use land banking and they use various contract rights to get access to land, but they don't buy the land. The American model was borrow a lot of money, buy a bunch of land, and hopefully sooner or later cash flow that land into houses. And we're just not doing that in this cycle. So to your point, return on equity is going to stay higher even with a pullback because they're not planning as much capital on their balance sheet into the land. And so it's just a much more sustainable business. It's a less levered industry. There's hardly any leverage going into this. So how can you get a nightmare in the home building business, not necessarily the home building picture at large, but the business when there's no debt? It's really tough to go bankrupt with no debt.
Cole, at the same time, though, housing completions are starting to pick up, even though starts and permits are really rolling over. What's the chance that we see a housing overhang at some point, particularly if rates keep moving higher? And then at that point, it makes the home builders tough to stomach.
It's a good question. I actually don't think about that as much. I think about the mental reset in the mind of a millennial buyer. Okay. I have 4 kids, so it's not crazy for me to have to look at a bigger house at some point here with 2 daughters that are going to turn teenagers over the next couple of years. And so in that discussion, Alix, as you go to say, okay, I need a bigger house, what do I do? The idea that you're going to get 4% or lower than that just gone. So the expectations have not reset yet. But notice in housing prices, they're not falling. I look at this as a momentum-oriented price market. Now that we've set up housing as a normal good, or Veblen, to use the economic term, it's a preferred good over other things. And therefore, you're going to get fluctuations in building, but you can't get a nightmare as a homeowner.
Okay, a couple of things in there. A, some sort of outbuilding for you, I would suggest, just speaking from personal experience, might be a good idea at this point. Secondly, you think about Veblen goods, though, the more they appreciate, the more people want them. Is the housing market really operating like that?
Amen, Guy. That's exactly what's going on. Because everyone realized that having a garden party at your own home where the government couldn't tell you what to do is so much better than being in an apartment where the apartment building can't let you do anything, okay? It is. At higher prices, they want it more. So think of the 1970s. Okay, we had terrible inflation. We had the highest mortgage rates over a decade we ever had in U.S. history. What asset class for the average household did incredible despite the stock and bond markets doing terrible? It was houses. Now, by the way, as you guys know, I'll have to probably use a draw with this. It was energy too, but it was houses for the average household.
Hey, Cole, we can't let you go without sort of touching on retail for a moment also. We talked about Walmart coming in much better than estimated, and I'm wondering, how do you play that? Like, you don't own Walmart, but they're taking share from somebody. So how do you play that, and what's the read-through to the guys like Target, for example?
Yeah, I think read-throughs are really tough right now, just so you know. I mean, we own Target. We've owned that, going back, about 5 years now. So I think trying to use how does Walmart react to this versus Target, I think that's tough. I mean, in our international portfolio, we own Canada Goose. We own retailers like Next in the UK. And I think it's all over the place. Canada Goose had really good numbers for what people thought, despite the fact that China's a nightmare for them. as an example. So I don't think one retailer to another you're seeing the same thing. But what I overarchingly believe is the retail space, people are way too fearful of it. I mean, to go one step further, people are getting really worried about these kind of stories, Alex, with mall REITs. We're at 3% or less vacancy in mall REITs. That's where you can see some really wild things and leases show up, because if you are an online retailer and you need to get into a retail space, what you pay to get that last spot becomes incredible. There's a lot of convexity out there. So I just say that because looking at malls is very different than looking at Walmart right now. And I think people trying to kind of put a macro bet on, they're going to miss this completely. It's a total stock pickers market. That's kind of the fun part for us.